Hello everyone and welcome to the next review for Nan Shepherd's The Living Mountain, a book that I probably should have read many years ago. A book about Scotland, a book about the Highlands and in particular the Cairngorm Plateau, the Cairngorm Mountains. I think I have a propensity to avoid writing or creative works generally that touch on subjects of importance to me, and this is a prime example. I think it brings to mind my past and where I used to be, and there's a lot of baggage there. Having lived in England since 2013, I grew up in Scotland for about 20 years, and it can be difficult to return to anything, not just a book, but a film, a music even that relates to Scotland. Sense of deep nostalgia, I think. So as always, starting with the back of the book. In this masterpiece of nature writing being a bit of an unhelpful term here, a bit misguided, implies a dichotomy between ourselves and nature out there. It's also fairly descriptive as well. It's not the best label for a style of a genre of writing. In this masterpiece of nature writing, Nan Shepherd describes her journeys into the Cairngorm Mountains of Scotland. There, she encounters a world that can be breathtakingly beautiful at times, and shockingly harsh at others. Her intense, poetic prose explores and records the rocks, rivers, creatures, and hidden aspects of this remarkable landscape. Shepherd spent a lifetime in search of the essential nature of the Cairngorms. Her quest led her to write this classic meditation on the magnificence of mountains. Composed during the Second World War, the manuscript of The Living Mountain lay untouched for more than 30 years. 30, or 30, as we would say in Scotland. 30 years before it was finally published. Just before I begin, I just want to give a bit more context, I think. Grew up in Scotland, moved from small-scale explorations of pockets of nature, small woodlands and so forth in my area in the lowlands, travelling around the east coast, which is where I'm from, near Edinburgh, and volunteering there, and then gradually moving up and up and up to the Trossachs, for example, and then the Cairngorms in the centre of Scotland, really the core of the Highlands. And then, of course, moving further up to places like Torridon and Benny and Skye and whatnot. The Cairngorms, I have not been to the Cairngorms in several years now. So some of my fondest memories are associated with the Cairngorms. Hiking up Mialavokal, wandering through the majestic pine woods of Abernethy Forest, placing a note beneath a rock at Lochgarten with my twin. So many things. Going on study trips even. I went to the Cairngorms as part of a study trip on my diploma in 2015, and I was the only Scot in the entire class, obviously coming from a college/university in England. So going back up there as the only Scottish person, it felt very strange. So many things, so many associations with the Cairngorms, but I just haven't been to the Cairngorms. I think I've not been to the Cairngorms since 2014, 2015. So to read this it's a strange experience. It took me back, but also I had difficulty sometimes actually imagining what Nan Shepherd, despite the refined quality of her prose, the depth of feeling, I had difficulty really grasping the place. Aside from a few places like Abernethy, Aviemore, the Green Lochan, places like that. So, The Living Mountain. As Robert Macfarlane suggests in his excellent foreword to the book, this is a radical text. It was a radical text when it was published in the 70s. It's not a book about conquering nature. It's not about the ascent. It's not about the climb to the next pinnacle. A lot of writers of mountains were men. And they tended to focus on the struggle, the manful struggle to conquer and to subdue nature, to test oneself against the natural world. Nan Shepherd saw it differently. She wanted to peer into the mountain. She wanted to explore its character, to slowly observe and to feel oneself as part of the mountain, to get at the essential nature of the mountain, rather than just to bag a Monroe, as we say. But it's deeper than that. It's much deeper than that. This is a book fundamentally about the embodied experience. It's not detached. It's not a scientific document. It's not trying to describe and totalize the mountain in a detached, disinterested way. This is a book that really, as McFarlane also suggests, it hints towards eco-phenomenology. This book was actually being written around the same time as Merleau-Ponty was writing, The Phenomenologist. For those that are not aware, Merleau-Ponty's essential idea is that we experience the world through the body. We are embedded in the world precisely because we are embodied. We are feeling, sensing animals. We're not detached from nature. And he's describing the whole field of phenomenology, and this goes back to people like Husserl and Heidegger and so forth. And then in the contemporary literature, we have people like David Abram, Spell of the Sensuous, and Patrick Curry in his writings on enchantment. And so without necessarily knowing it, Nan Shepherd she had a very strong intuitive feeling for phenomenology, eco-phenomenology. So Nan Shepherd was actually really, really well-rounded. She was an English lecturer. She studied English, and then she became a lecturer. She was a writer of poetry, novels. But she had a great interest generally, not just in English, but philosophy and history and all manner of things. For example, Robert McFarlane in the foreword suggests that she was what Coleridge once called a library cormorant, omnivorous and voracious in her reading. On the 7th of May 1907, aged just 14, she started the first of what she called her medleys, commonplace books into which she copied literary, religious and philosophical citations, in which reveal the breadth of her reading as a young woman. So you can see that she wasn't just writing about the mountain. She knew, she was informed about these philosophical ideas, these deeper, she was getting at the deeper strains and tensions relating to our relationship with the natural world. So this book is divided between different aspects of the mountain, different phenomena, or different locations. For example, the plateau, recesses, water, air and light, the plants, birds, animals and insects, birds, mammals and insects, man, sleep, the senses, and generally each of the chapters has a core to it. Chapter 1, the plateau. Summer on the high plateau can be delectable as honey. It can also be a roaring scourge. To those who love the place, both are good, since both are part of its essential nature. And it is to know its essential nature that I am seeking here. To know, that is, with the knowledge that is a process of living. This is not done easily, nor in an hour. It is a tale too slow for the impatience of our age, not of immediate enough import for its desperate problems. Yet it has its own rare value. It is, for one thing, a corrective of glib assessment. One never quite knows the mountain, nor oneself in relation to it. However often I walk on them, these hills hold astonishment for me. There is no getting accustomed to them. That's a very animistic sensibility there. The sense that this mountain, it's in a sense a unified person, but it's not a monistic entity. Nan Shepherd doesn't, she actually says later on in the book that she doesn't describe sentience to the mountain, and that is correct. It's more a collection of, of, of living sensuous particulars that all come together and make the place, make the Cairngorms. But she says, one never quite knows the mountain. I love that. It's not an object that can be totally analysed. Or the mountain is not standing as a partially analysed object. And she's saying something that's fundamental to an appreciation of nature, which is, as Patrick Curry says, to never see something as just a copy of something else. If you've seen one mountain, you can't just say of the next mountain, oh, I've seen a mountain already, that's just another example of it. So that's what she's saying. These hills still hold astonishment, and there's no getting accustomed to them. To prove the point about how her sensibility is very much animistic, she actually says, so to prove the point here that she really has quite an animistic sensibility, she's speaking about water in the lyric pool. She says, water so clear cannot be imagined but must be seen. One must go back and back again to look at it, for in the interval memory refuses to recreate its brightness. This is one of the reasons why the high plateau where these streams begin, the streams themselves, their cataracts and rocky beds, the corries, the whole wild enchantment, like a work of art, is perpetually new when one returns to it. The mind cannot carry away all that it has to give. Nor does it always believe possible what it has carried away. I find it very difficult to read text like that for various reasons, but one of them is I love the fact that she actually says the whole wild enchantment. She directly relates the quality of wildness to enchantment. But yes, it also reminded me of the fact that when I was sitting down discussing the gratitude in the Chiltern Hills, the Chinner Hill, I was talking about how there's always something new to see. How dare I imagine that I have seen and fully appreciated even a single patch of a woodland floor. Always Nan Shepherd is pointing to something deeper. A clue towards this idea is, or evidence towards this idea, is that the first chapter is about the plateau, and she's saying that she has this deep desire to ascend, to be elevated, because it clears her mind, it makes her feel real, it makes her feel, she actually says that she has this faintness that comes upon her when she's in the mountains, a bodily lightness. But she's aware that it's not just that it can't just be a case of feeling healthier and more free. She says, this bodily lightness then, in the rarefied air, combines with the liberation of space to give mountain faintness to those who are susceptible to such a malady. For it is a malady, subverting the will and superseding the judgment, but a malady of which the afflicted will never ask to be cured. For this nonsense of physiology does not really explain it at all. What, am I such a slave that unless my flesh feels buoyant I cannot be free? No, there is more in the lust for a mountain top than a perfect physiological adjustment. What more there is lies within the mountain. Something moves between me and it. Place and a mind may interpenetrate till the nature of both is altered. That is pure ecophenomenology, pure enchantment. She really gets the dynamics here. I cannot tell what this movement is except by recounting it. And that is the end of the first chapter. So she's getting to this idea. It's much more about the imaginative interplay of self and world. I just want to, there's so much to say here, and I always have a tendency to just to give so many thoughts about every individual chapter. I think I'm not going to try and connect everything. I just want to pinpoint certain things that meant something to me. In the very next chapter on recesses, there's this idea about inaccessibility. The inaccessibility of this lock is part of its power. Silence belongs to it. If Jeep finds it out, or a funicular railway disfigures it, part of its meaning will be gone. The good of the greatest number is not here relevant. It is necessary to be sometimes exclusive, not on behalf of rank or wealth, but of those human qualities that can apprehend loneliness. That's one of the best passages I've ever read in anything. It might sound like a stretch, but I absolutely love that. The sense that why does something need to, if something can be done, doesn't mean that it's good. Why do we need to build here? Why do we need to disturb silence? Why do we even need to go to it? Why can't something just be left alone? Even if we're not, there's a silent, untouched lock deep in the recesses of the mountain. Why can't we just leave it there? The very silence points to something of that place, points to something. The world itself, the very fact that the world can just be as it is. I'm not articulating that properly. Necessary to be sometimes exclusive. There's so much to say there about the rooted, the local, the particular. Why does everything have to meld and be changed and developed? Why can't things be set aside? The very notion that something can be left aside tells us that we can still apprehend loneliness or silence. Something else as well. She says, moving on from this apprehension of loneliness, she says, the presence of another person does not detract from, but enhances the silence, if the other is the right sort of hill companion. The perfect hill companion is the one whose identity is for the time being merged in that of the mountains, as you feel your own to be. Now, that's a difficult passage to read, because it reminds me of walks with my twin, especially places like Abernethy, Skye, but primarily places like Craigmeggy, near Loch Laggan, which isn't too far from the Cairngorms. Wandering, which you might have seen on this channel, wandering to see the window, the great Bealach, the great passage, the great call, the mountain call, COL, the notch in the mountains called the window, and to travel further on to see Corriarder in silence, just being there with someone who appreciates the mountain in the same way that you do. Don't always have to speak. In fact, later on, Nan suggests that she has walked herself with brilliant young people whose talk, entertaining, witty and incessant, left her nevertheless weary and dispirited because the hill did not speak. I love that. This book is so dedicated to the external, to the other. All sorts of themes may be lit up from within. This does not imply that the only good talk on a hill is about the hill. All sorts of themes may be lit up from within, by contact with it, as they are by contact with another mind, and so discussion may be salted. She has a brilliant way of words. Yet to listen is better than to speak. The talking tribe, I find, want sensation from the mountain, not in Keats's sense. Beginners not naturally do the same. I did myself. They want the startling view, the horrid pinnacle, sips of beer and tea instead of milk. I suppose, yes, to go out and to say, wow, rather than just to be there and to take it in. Yet often the mountain gives itself most completely when I have no destination, when I reach nowhere in particular, but have gone out merely to be with the mountain as one visits a friend, with no intention but to be with him. That's perfectly said, because it's not actually about you, not really. There's this interplay between self and world and so forth, but it's just to be in the presence of the mountain or other than human beings without any again, not striving to do anything, just to be. So I've been speaking fairly high-mindedly about philosophical concepts and things like this, but I will just say something that I'm not exactly proud of saying. It might seem strange, but I do have a tendency to find it difficult to read landscape descriptions, especially when I haven't been to a particular place. A lot of the time, despite coming from Scotland, I can't say I've done a lot of hill walking or a lot of mountain walking. So when she's describing in chapter 3 her first climb up Ben Macdhu, and she's talking about Corrie Etchishan. I'm not even sure how to fully pronounce that word, unfortunately. I didn't learn Gaelic. I believe it's Etchishan. And she's talking about the D-side hills and the Monad Lives and Spey and so forth. Not only do I not have a sense of the place because I haven't been there, but generally, admittedly, I do tend to, if there's one thing that I can say that I didn't enjoy about the book, is that sometimes, despite the brilliance of the prose, I just couldn't grasp what was being described. And I think that's a fairly common occurrence with, I feel like people do have that same problem. A friend of mine does say that he finds it difficult to read long, extended passages describing scenery. It's interesting as well, it's quite difficult because a lot of the book isn't just describing the mountain. One of the main points about the Living Mountain is defamiliarization. One of the key messages is that our sight, our apprehension of the world is never total, it's never whole, it's never fully established or set in stone. We can always see things differently, and she's not talking about the deep philosophical, in this point, she's not talking about the deep philosophical, animistic, phenomenological view of the world. She's saying, if you lie on your back, the world will change. You will see things differently. She has a tendency to focus on vision, of seeing things in an altered way, which can make understanding the landscape that she's describing a bit more challenging, especially if you haven't climbed Ben Macdhu, or you've not actually been to Loch Nagar or the pools of Dee or Loch Avon. So just on this point about not fully understanding what is being described or not being familiar with a particular place, it is on the contrary, on the flip side, very pleasing when you come across a description of a place you do know. There's a part where Nan says she's describing Cairngorm as having the finest complement of lochs, and she describes Loch Avon and then Loch Morlich. I've been to Loch Morlich, it's a lovely place. But then she describes Loch Ewan, whose waters have the green gleam of old copper roofs. I remember seeing Loch Ewan, or the Green Lochan, after climbing Mialavokal. It's a long time ago, 2012, 2013, just before I moved down to England. I remember climbing that hill and seeing the Green Lochan from afar, just this pool of, almost, I don't use the word alien, but it's such a curious colour of green from afar, and then you can descend into the pinewood-clad Pass of Ravone and get to the Green Lochan. It's just a wonderful place to be. I suppose just moving from that description of the Green Lochan to a chapter on water, I just wanted just something that I underlined. She's describing the wells of Dee, and she says, water, that strong white stuff, one of the 4 elemental mysteries, can here be seen at its origins. Like all profound mysteries, it is so simple that it frightens me. That's if ever there was a sentence to really just think about, that's one of them. Like all profound mysteries, it is so simple that it frightens me. I think that's actually I think that's really a core message of the book, in fact. And here she's describing it in miniature and microcosm of just one particular body of water. For the most appalling quality of water is its strength. I love its flash and gleam, its music, its pliancy and grace, its slap against my body. But I fear its strength. I fear it as my ancestors must have feared the natural forces that they worshipped. All the mysteries are in its movement. It slips out of holes in the earth like the ancient snake. I have seen its birth, and the more I gaze at that, sure and unremitting surge of water at the very top of the mountain, the more I am baffled. We make it all so easy. Any child in school can understand it. Water rises in the hills, it flows and finds its own level, and man can't live without it. But I don't understand it. I cannot fathom its power. Again, it's this idea that we compartmentalize, we specialize, categorize, rationalize. Everything is a box, everything is a theory, and yet there's such a simple thing as rushing water and its power that we will, no matter how much we think about it, we will never understand it. Never look at it we will never encompass even a single element such as water. So I'm skipping ahead a little bit here. I'm skipping a little bit ahead here. I just want to try and get across some of the passages that meant something to me or I found beautiful or stirring. Because in so many of these pages, there's just it's so dense, I think. She describes changing of the seasons, the effect of frost and snow and air and light, the movement of a bird, a glittering plant, even as I'm about to describe. There's just, as you can imagine, it's the whole life of the mountain. She's describing so many different facets and aspects of it, and I have a tendency to want to actually do the text justice, but perhaps you'll see what I mean. Or, in a drab season, and feeling as drab as the weather, I stand on a bridge above a swollen stream, and suddenly the world is made anew. Submerged but erect in the margin of the stream, I see a tree hung with light, a minimal tree, but exquisite, its branches delicate with globes of light that sparkle under the water. I clamber down and thrust a sacrilegious hand into the stream. I am holding a sodden and shapeless thing. I slip it again under the water, and instantly again it is a tree of light. I take it out and examine it. It is a sprig of square-stalked St. John's wort, a plant whose leaves are covered with minute pores that can exude a film of oil, protecting it against the water that has engulfed it, in like manner as the dipper plunging into the stream has a film of light between him and the water. I think of the silver bow of Celtic mythology, and marvel that an enchantment can be made from so small a matter. I don't think I need to say anything more. I cannot talk about this book without covering the chapter on plants. I have written of inanimate things, rock and water, frost and sun, and it might seem as though this were not a living world. But I have wanted to come to the living things through the forces that create them. For the mountain is one and indivisible, and rock, soil, water and air are no more integral to it than what grows from the soil and breathes the air. All are aspects of one entity, the living mountain. I will say, I'm not sure if there's a sense of slight contradiction in the sense that she doesn't ascribe sentience to the mountain, and she knows that it's not, it's both true and not true at the same time, that you can call the mountain an entity. Sometimes she writes about it in slightly contradictory ways. I personally found that you can't say that the mountain is one entity, but we do know that ultimately she means the collective concrete particulars with their own individual lives and life ways make up the mountain, as opposed to a singular entity. I think of what I love about the chapter on plants is that she really tries to get across the simultaneous character of the mountain and how it can be, and how this relates to the ecology of plants. How plants can be at once hardy, having to deal with extreme conditions, and yet so fragile and vulnerable and beautiful. She gets that across so well. There's such a profusion of life in these passages. Suffice it to say, she's speaking of blaeberry and heather. She's speaking of juniper. She's speaking um, of the pine trees, even Scots pine. She actually says, the aromatic savour of the pine goes into the deepest recesses of her lungs, and she knows that it is life that is entering. Incredible. She speaks of the birch trees and how exquisite they are when the opening leaves just fleck them with points of green flame, or the thinning leaves turn them to a golden lace, and yet they are loveliest of all when naked. In a low sun, the spun silk floss of their twigs seems to be created out of light. I think to give you a sense of, I think I'm just going to read this next section as this next page and a half or so. I want to try and give you not only an understanding of the beautiful prose, the profusion of life that's in these pages, but also her more philosophical leanings as well. Of the inconspicuous things that creep in heather, I have a special affection for stag moss, not the hard braided kind, but the fuzzy kind we call toadstools. I was taught the art of picking these by my father when I was a small child. We lay on the heather, and my fingers learned to feel their way along each separate trail and side branch, carefully detaching each tiny root, until we had thick, bunchy pieces many yards long. It was a good art to teach a child. Though I did not know it then, I was learning my way in, through my own fingers, to the secret of growth. That secret the mountain never quite gives away. Man is slowly learning to read it. He watches, he ponders patiently, he adds fact to fact. He finds a hint of it in the formidable roots of the moss campion, and in the fine roots that the tiny eyebright sends into the substance of the grass to ease its own search for food, eyebright being a hemiparasite. I just had to add that in. It is in the glaucous and fleshy leaves of the sedums and saxifrages, through which they store the bounty of the earth against the times when the earth is not bountiful. It is in the miniature size of the smallest willow, whose woolly fluff blows about the plateau, as the silky hairs of the cotton grass blow about the bogs, and in the miniature azalea that grows splayed against the mountain for protection, and lures the rare insects by its rosy hue, and flourishes like the heather on granite, whereas granite cannot meet the needs of many of the rare mountain flowers that crave the streaks of limestone, or the rich humus of the mesocist, like that rarest of all, found in only one spot in the Cairngorms, the alpine milkvetch, its delicate pale bloom edged with lavender, haunted by its red and black familiar, the burnet moth. Why so haunted no one knows, but no milkvetch, no burnet moth. It's almost heady. It's dizzying. But I love that sentiment there. These relationships, these ecological relationships intertwined. Why so haunted, no one knows. Carrying on a wet, windy, sunless day, when moths would hardly be expected to be visible at all, we have found numbers of these tart little creatures on the milkvetch clumps. The more one learns of this intricate interplay of soil, altitude, weather, and the living tissues of plant and insect, an intricacy that has its astonishing moments, as when sundew and butterwort eat the insects, the more the mystery deepens. With mystery, you only go further in. A puzzle and a mystery are not the same. A puzzle can be analysed and completed. The more the mystery deepens, knowledge does not dispel mystery. Scientists tell me that the alpine flora of the Scottish mountains is Arctic in origin, that these small scattered plants have outlived the glacial period and are the only vegetable life in our country that is older than the Ice Age. But that does not explain them, it only adds time to the equation and gives it a new dimension. I find I have a naive faith in my scientist friends. They are such jolly people, they wouldn't fib to me unnecessarily, and their stories make the world so interesting. But my imagination boggles at this. I can imagine the antiquity of rock, but the antiquity of a living flower, that is harder. It means that these tufts of the mountaintop, with their angelic inflorescence and the devil in their roots, have had the cunning and the effrontery to cheat not only a winter but an ice age. The scientists have the humility to acknowledge that they do not know how it has been done. Nan really does understand quite intuitively the earth-centered outlook. Just to prove that point, in chapter 8, Birds, Animals and Insects, Nan is talking about the power of flight. She's speaking of the golden eagle and the ptarmigan and the plover and other such mountain birds. And it's incredible. She describes the motion of flight. She says, "It seems odd that merely to watch the motion of flight should give the body not only vicarious exhilaration but release. So urgent is the rhythm that it invades the blood. This power of flight to take us into itself through the eyes, as though we had actually shared in the motion." That's a wonderful, because you're not a detached observer. In a sense of enchantment, when you are living for a moment of enchantment, it's not just you and the bird flying out there. In fact, I might as well read to you a short explication of what wonder is that I wrote a while ago for The Ecological Citizen. I said, "Many of us have experienced a sense of wonder towards nature, taking flight not with, but as a soaring bird, or breathing with the lush trees in a forest. But as, it's not just, you are taking part, essentially, in the life of the animal, when you are enchanted. The boundaries are, I'm going into this too much now, but the boundaries are still there. You are still yourself and the bird is still there, but in this moment of enchantment, the differences dissolve slightly." So just connected to flight, just moving on to a different point. I just love this description of a particular bird. "Strong flight is a characteristic also of another bird that haunts not the precipice, but the plateau itself, the small, unassuming dotterel. You are wandering one summer day on a plateau slope. When your ear catches its plover-like cry, you pause and watch, no bird is there. Then you move slowly towards the sound, and in a moment one bird, then another, rises in short, low flight, comes to earth again, and runs, crouched to the ground like a small grey mouse. Shape, movement, colour are all so mouse-like that the illusion almost might deceive you, were it not for the vivid black and white of the head, the glowing breast, and the white tail feathers." This is a lovely description. It just reminds me of a wonderful experience I had surveying dotterel at the top of Craigmeggy. Not part of the Cairngorms, but as I mentioned previously, fairly nearby. And it's just the whole day we spent looking for dotterel, and we saw, I think it was just one, maybe two. I do definitely remember one of them, just camouflaged on the high plateau. It's a perfect description of how mouse-like and how inconspicuous that bird is. And just relating to that point about Craigmeggy as well, I remember during that trip seeing some scattering of deer on a snowfield high up in the mountains, and I'm making this point because I just love the certain sights, certain phenomena, certain experiences are shared between people, and I just love the way that Nan writes about deer in the mountains. She says, "Deer, on the other hand, are conspicuous in snow. In a completely white world, one can see from a high shoulder a herd feeding 1,000 feet beneath, vivid black specks on the whiteness." That is exactly how I remember seeing these vivid black specks on the whiteness. Just an extended section here. I just want to give you a sense of just how much life has been put into the pages. Not just other young things, leverets in the form wrapped in silky hair, fox cubs playing in the sun in a distant fold of the hill, the fox himself with his fat red brush, the red-brown squirrel in the woods below, wagging his tail against a tree trunk, and chattering through closed lips, I think, against the intruder, gold-brown lizards and the gold-brown floss of cocoons in the heather, small golden bees and small blue butterflies, green dragonflies and emerald beetles, moths like oiled paper, and moths like burnt paper, water beetles skimming the highest tarns, small mice, so rarely seen but leaving 1,000 tracks upon the snow, ant heaps of birch twigs or pine needles, preens in the northern world, flickering with activity when the sun shines, midges, mosquitoes, flies by the 100,000, adders and a rare strange slowworm, small frogs jumping like tiddlywinks, rich brown hairy caterpillars by the handful, and fat green ones with blobs of amethyst, a perfect camouflage on heather, life in so many guises. Indeed. So just moving on a little bit from non-human animals, I just want to make a brief, I'm not going to dwell on this too much, but I just want to make a brief point about the chapter on man, chapter 9. I got a sense of this, just another time, another world, and reading this chapter of a rustic world, a world of slowness and discernment, hardship, but also simple beauty. This chapter is dedicated to all the hillmen and the hill women that Nan has met throughout her life, and there's just so much here that it almost feels alien to our digital, fast-moving world. It almost seems like they are from a different world entirely, and especially with the old Scottish customs and traditions. So I think I'll just leave you with certain passages from the end of the book, just to get across this idea of the true meaning of the living mountain, just really about the interplay between self and world, being embodied and embedded in the earth, of having a relational outlook on life. So in a chapter on sleep, she's discussing vision. And something I loved here is this particular passage, which again, I spoke about defamiliarization, and here she's really getting to that point. She says, just as one example, she says, a scatter of white flowers and grass, looked at through half-closed eyes, blaze out with a sharp clarity as though they had actually risen up out of their background. Such illusions, depending on how the eye is placed and used, drive home the truth that our habitual vision of things is not necessarily right. It is only one of an infinite number, and to glimpse an unfamiliar one, even for a moment, unmakes us, but steadies us again. This sense of, she's describing a single view of white flowers and grass, and how they can somehow look sharper with the eyes closed. So changes in perception, but also just being touched by something, having the presence to be moved by something different. Such a moment can unmake us, but then of course one is steadied again. It's queer but invigorating. And in fact, she says, it will take a long time to get to the end of a world that behaves like this, if I do no more than turn round on my side or my back. That's an incredible way of putting it. She's saying the world is so infinitely rich and deep and textured and layered, and yet if we just turn on our back, it's different yet again. It changes the whole configuration. How can I number the worlds to which the eye gives me entry? The world of light, of colour, of shape, of shadow, of mathematical precision in the snowflake, the ice formation, the quartz crystal, the patterns of stamen and petal, of rhythm in the fluid curve and plunging line of the mountain faces. Why some blocks of stone hacked into violent and tortured shapes should so profoundly tranquilize the mind, I do not know. Perhaps the eye imposes its own rhythm on what is only a confusion. One has to look creatively to see this mass of rock as more than jag and pinnacle, as beauty. Else why did men for so many centuries think mountains repulsive? A certain kind of consciousness interacts with the mountain forms to create this sense of beauty. Yet the forms must be there for the eye to see, and forms of a certain distinction. Mere dollops won't do it. It is, as with all creation, matter impregnated with mind. But the resultant issue is a living spirit, a glow in the consciousness that perishes when the glow is dead. It is something snatched from non-being, that shadow which creeps in on us continuously and can be held off by continuous creative act. So, simply to look on anything, such as a mountain, with the love that penetrates to its essence, is to widen the domain of being in the vastness of non-being. Man has no other reason for his existence. She's speaking there of vision and the importance of vision and the imagination, and how our vision interplays and relates to the world around us. But she actually does go on to say that touch is the most intimate sense of all. Certain theorists I know would tend to disagree, I think, at least in part. Han, for example, Byung-Chul Han suggests that the haptic is too coarse and immediate, whereas vision creates a sense of distance and mystery. Although I don't know, maybe a slight contradiction there, because he does say that the hand and the material, the like Heidegger's hand, for example, the symbol of the hand, and what that means for work and the materiality of the world, clearly has a lot of significance there. And yet, Han seems to denigrate that touch, whereas again, Nan is saying that touch is the most intimate sense, and she's speaking about the sensitivity of the skin and how the whole body can be braced and resistant and poised or relaxed in answers to the thrust of forces incomparably stronger than itself. She speaks of cold water and wind and so forth. So really, she made a great point about vision there in the previous passage, but touch is the most important. To be embodied, to feel. It is essentially, she's getting at the flesh of the world. Merleau-Ponty's idea of the flesh of the world, the indivisible connection between body and the external reality. Final passage. On that point about the flesh of the world, Nan Shepherd actually says, "Walking thus, hour after hour, the senses keyed, one walks the flesh transparent, but no metaphor, transparent, or light as air, is adequate. The body is not made negligible, but paramount. Flesh is not annihilated, but fulfilled. One is not bodiless, but essential body." That's the key point of this book. The very final lines, Nan says, "I believe that I now understand in some small measure why the Buddhist goes on pilgrimage to a mountain. The journey is itself part of the technique by which the God is sought. It is a journey into being, capital B, being. For as I penetrate more deeply into the mountain's life, I penetrate also into my own. For an hour I am beyond desire. It is not ecstasy, that leap out of the self that makes man like a god. I am not out of myself, but in myself I am, to know being. This is the final grace accorded from the mountain. The living mountain. Thanks for watching, everyone. Until next time.